In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. We have instructions and support and encouragement to be generous, and to be generous in a good way this morning. It has always been one of the joys of the idea of having Mass or the Lord's table at this time on a Wednesday, with food being sold by people trying to make a living from selling food. On that side of the building, people on this side been giving food because we as a community haven't enabled them to earn a living enough to buy food. A couple of different varieties on this side, and then we've got the shopkeepers further on, down in the thoroughfare and beyond, on that side. And here we are sharing in a sort of physical representation of the spiritual food, if you like, that sustains us and our understanding of how God is generous and wants to support and feed all aspects of our shortcomings, and to nurture and grow all that is good in us and in this community, here within all that activity. And so our reading today, whilst it sounds a little bit like something you might expect to hear at a harvest festival, God supplies seed to the sower and bread for food, will supply your seed for sowing and increase your harvest of righteousness. We are able to engage in that idea of feeding and being fed. The passage opens with what sounds like a bit of a telling off. If you sow sparingly, you will reap sparingly. If you sow bountifully, you will reap bountifully. I would say that most of everybody I know is giving bountifully, and so should expect to receive bountifully. There are not many people in our small congregations, in our small church committees, and in the charitable sector of our town who are not giving over and above what anybody might expect of them. It's a challenge any of you who are involved in any committees to find other people to join your committee, whether it's the cricket club, the Millennium Green, Men's Shed, or your PCC Church Council, or the Village Council. And sometimes volunteering can seem like a thankless task, but sometimes it can be a real treat and a pleasure. Sometimes people come to our organisation for support and encouragement, and we just think, well, their life might be so much better if they went somewhere else. And sometimes we think, well, that's exactly the sort of person, that's exactly the sort of outcome that I have given myself to this organisation to try and achieve. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't, but that's a message we can give, I think, as church. That things have been high, things have been low in our church history. Things have been high and things have been low in our own lives. Sometimes we need to receive, and sometimes we might be moved to give. And for some of us it's easier to give than to receive. But be encouraged. If we live and if we encourage a generous culture, then when our time comes to give, when our time comes to receive, there will be enough for us. And that particular passage was written at a time when there was a famine, and Paul was exhorting the people of Corinth to give so that he could take food back to the Judeans who were struggling at that time when he headed off in that direction. In our Gospel, we hear of doing good works, but we're being encouraged to do good works in a way that is quiet and gentle and not self-edifying, not self-promoting, perhaps I should say. It can be a challenge for us as people, as church, as voluntary organisations, to know how to promote ourselves. We don't necessarily want to suggest that we have enough, and therefore we can afford glossy paper and glossy PR. But equally, if people don't know what we're doing, they might overlook our contribution and maybe even set something else in parallel. So there is a balance to be struck, I would suggest. Whenever you give charitably, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, or vice versa. Sometimes actually, particularly if one is in a charitable organisation that gives money, that's their job, like the Clergy Support Trust, for example, they need to know that people know that they are there. They need to know that they are there so that people can donate and give to the charity, but also so that clergy, if they need to receive help, as there is and I do several times a year, I'm very grateful to them for being able to have a holiday this year. Clergy need to know they're there so that they can claim. Just as we might know people who have mental health conditions and would benefit from Mencap, or are dealing with an end-of-life sickness or condition that means they can do with the support of the pear tree. And there are many situations like that that we might know of, that we might be able to help other people towards. And so there is a balance of needing to promote what we're about, but also to recognise we need to have a certain amount of humility, and that if we do blow our own trumpet to too great an extent, it can have repercussions and consequences that we were not expecting. And Matthew is writing to and for a Christian community, so he's able to say, well, God knows. That might not necessarily help those who are not necessarily spiritual or churchy, but I think the same thing holds true. We might use different language and different words for it. There are aspects, I'm sure we've all had that experience in work, but it's the same in church. There might be some parishes that think, oh, of course that parish has got their picture on the front cover of the parish magazine. It's always them. Or that parish always has more vicars or more services than us. Or that person, I'm quite sure that that's why they've got that adulation or that promotion and not us. Why they've got to park in the director's space this week or this month. They never do any work, but they wear a short dress or whatever it is that we might say bitterly that means that they get the attention that we feel we deserve. So let us speak about and for generosity. Help people understand that in fact we all benefit from generous hearts and welcoming attitude. That's not to say we need to belittle ourselves or put ourselves down, but also recognise that whilst other people might get the limelight, that might not be all that there is to it. And let us also speak for integrity of people. There are some who are in the papers at the moment because of the people that we would rather they were not. And there are plenty of people who are in the papers because they do things that are good and worthy and worthwhile, that you might have to make your way back from the front to the back pages to find them, or tune in to your local radio station rather than the nationals to find them. May God be gracious